10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Radio, your trusted source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime. Coming to you live from the Mistopheles Studios, it's Dark Fringe Radio.
I try to move, but my body won't work. I try to talk, but I lose all words. All that ever slips from my face are teeth and dreams I can't take. Waking from.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Dark Fringe Radio. I am your host, Will Martinez, and thank you for coming on Dark Fringe Radio, your number one spot for the paranormal, conspiratorial, and true crime. And, of course, can't do this without my co-host, Jay Galosi. Jay, what is going on, brother?
What's up, my guy? What's up?
Yeah.
We had a great interview that will be this episode. We've been having a lot of fun, had a lot of laughs, a lot of synchronicity. That was the word of the evening. But yeah, I'm fantastic. I feel so professional now with this new microphone.
Yeah, I mean, you sound fantastic, Jay. And thanks for joining us, of course, on Dark Fringe Radio. Jay, I wanted to kind of introduce some of the new listeners. If they wanted to listen to maybe some of our older episodes and wanted to hear more of us, where could they go ahead and do that?
Well, if you're looking for the audio version of us, if you only want us in your ears and not in your eyeballs, then you would go anywhere you get your podcast. You can go to Stitcher, you can go to Spotify, you can go to iHeartRadio, you can go to Google, you can go to any of them, anywhere you would find a podcast. But if you would like to see our punums, if you'd like to see these gorgeous faces also rejoice you with funny tales of their stupidity from Boynton and Ocean Ridge, then you would go find us at either YouTube. Please go there, like, rate, review. Lots of reviews, lots of feedback, helps us grow, helps us get in those algorithms, also helps us provide better content for you. Or if you want to just go straight to the spigot, get the source where it's most purest. If you want that honey right out of the tree, then you go to darkfringe.com, and there you can get all of our episodes. You can see videos, you can see our reels from our social media, and you can also get merchandise, Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. Darkfringeradio.com. Make sure you go there. That's where you can get, like Jay said, the source for everything Dark Fringe Radio. And, of course, merchandise. We got the Mistopheles t-shirt. I know I still got to get you yours, Jay. You're what, a large, check?
Oh, fuck you. Large.
No, what are you, a medium?
I'm 5'3", I'm 140 pounds.
Well, I don't know. You got some. You're a broad-shouldered motherfucker. What do you want me to say?
I'm a child's husky at best. No, I'm medium usually.
All right, got you, bro. Got you. All right. So, tonight we actually have a very special guest. His name is Andy Jiang, and we're going to be talking about. We did a quick interview with him about his podcast called Hidden Stories, and a really fascinating guy. Really getting into the podcast game. I really want to start kind of like helping out new guys that are coming into the game here, Jay, that actually have really good podcasts. And this guy really does have a good podcast. He does very short form type of podcast, maybe 20, 25 minutes at most. Just in and out, boom, boom, boom. He tells you the story and he's out. So I like that setup. His name is Andy Jiang. We're going to be talking to him in a little bit here. But first, we got to get into a lot of the other stuff. Of course, a lot of the bells and whistles. Which brings us to, of course, Dark Fringe News, Jay. And first thing I wanted to talk about, there it is. We're tapping in. And I apologize to everyone, first off, for being very so UFO-centric when it comes to our Dark Fringe News. But it's not my fault. It's just the stuff that's been coming out lately. I can't help it. It's just what's going on. And this week, Jay, it got even worse. There's a guy, UFO bombshell intelligence whistleblower, says that the feds have intact craft that they've picked up throughout the years. Not only does he say that there's intact craft, he says that there have been bodies also that have been recovered from these crafts that have either crashed or have been shot down by us. So, Jay, let me get into the story here. A whistleblower who served in the U.S. military, so this is a very high-level official. This is not somebody just saying, "Oh yeah, I was a janitor at Area 51, and I saw a couple craft, while I was doing some mopping." No, this guy has a very high clearance. So, who served in the U.S. military and served in several intelligence roles, says that the federal government has multiple craft of non-human origin. Non-human origin, of course, being the quote unquote, and have been working to overtime to cover it up. He says that there have been retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft, if you will, non-human exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed. David Grush told News Nation on Monday evening, and has been working overtime to cover it up, they say. There has also been retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles called spacecraft. But again, he's saying that they've found just more than vehicles, Jay. They've found bodies. They say when, of course, you find usually a craft that's crash landed, you're also going to find whatever it was that was navigating
Whatever
it,
was driving it when it crashed.
Exactly, Jay. So earlier today,
question, William.
Go ahead, Jay.
Question. Did any of them have a green ring on?
I don't know, Jay. I don't know the answer to that question. It's a very
friends.
Yeah.
Careful out there. There might be a test pilot who suddenly has a ring that will make all of his constructs from his mind, as long as he has confidence.
Reality. Yeah, well, Jay, earlier in the day, the debrief reported that Grush had told both the Congress and the U.S. Inspector General that this information was illegally withheld from lawmakers who have recently held hearings on UFO activity. The U.S. Military now prefers acronym UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomena, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. I mean, the same fucking shit if you ask me. But Grush, who saw combat in Afghanistan, served in several roles in U.S. intelligence community, was told the National Reconnaissance Office representative to the UF task force that the debrief that the U.S. government and its contractors have been retrieving materials for decades, Jay. The materials includes intact and partially intact vehicles, which he told the website, which were objects were analyzed and determined to be from non-human intelligence, whether extraterrestrial or of an unknown origin, Jay. He said that he already is facing retaliation and has hired an attorney and seeks a whistleblower protection. Grush told News Nation that he is not alone. He says that people have started to confide in me, quote unquote, approach me, and I have plenty of senior former intelligence officers that have come to me, many of which that I almost in my whole career that have confided in me that were part of my program, he said. Grush's claim is backed by reports from others, including a defense contractor who the New York Times reported in 2020 had debriefed the Defense Department officials on a range of discoveries, such as items retrieved from off-world vehicles not made of Earth. So it also comes with this, period of time here, Jay, where we're starting to see a lot of this stuff come out.
I mean,
and now we're starting to have whistleblowers.
Had this happened 10, 15 years ago, we'd all be like, oh my God, it's Independence Day, bro. Somebody get Will Smith. Quick.
Right.
But now it's not like that. We're all kind of like, oh, all right. Like you telling me that they have craft and bodies. I mean, am I really that surprised?
No, I mean, really.
I mean, maybe if they put it in a glass case,
right,
and wheeled it through the streets, it would give up some shock and awe. But when it's declassified in documents, and then you find out that it's kind of been going on for a long time, and the government's been hiding it from the government, then really all you could do is shake your head and be like, okay. Yeah.
Well, Jay, now you have this whistleblower coming out. He's a high-ranking official in the U.S. intelligence community. He's not just some layman who, just claiming wild things out there. This guy would have firsthand knowledge of things of such sort. At this point, can you defend it? Like saying, "Oh, there's no such thing as aliens, no such thing as UFOs." at this point.
It depends on how skeptical one wants to be, right?
Right.
If someone really wants to deny that those things exist until one's standing directly in front of them, then no matter what you put in front of them, unless it is an actual little green Martian man with those little ears saying, I'm here to take over, then they're not going to, or what is, I'm here in the name of Mars. Whatever Mother Martian used to say, I can't remember now. But unless it's there in front of them, they're never going to believe it. They're never going to accept it. So to hear that a high-level official, one could very easily make the argument without actually doing any research to say, all right, so he was in a high-level, very stressful job. I mean, PTSD has been proven to really trick you in your mind and your lack of reality. So you could make the argument that someone at that level who's been dealing with those kind of stresses for so long, you might want to question just really how together all of their faculties are and really just how organized their brain activity is. I'm not shocked. I mean, if it turned out that he was a kook, I wouldn't be shocked by that either. Fair.
Right. No, I get it.
I believe we have evidence. I believe that we have things that that the government isn't telling us about. I believe the government is lying to the government about it. Because that's just what
it seems like. Yeah, I mean, that's what it seems like at this point, Jay. I mean, and it ties into our next story for Dark Fringe News, which we'll get into in a second. But now we're getting into a really weird place here, Jay, because now we're starting to inch forward. We're starting to inch forward more. Yeah, we're starting kind of like okay, now there's supposed craft, now there's supposed beings that we've picked up. What's the next step? What's the next step after that? What's the next step after that? You know what I mean? There's always going to be a progression. It's not going to go backwards. They're not going to say all of a sudden, all that stuff that we caught, no, that was all bullshit. No, it's not going to be that.
No. They're going to keep doing like what they're doing. It's just like a soft opening in a retail store. Like you're driving down and suddenly you turn around and go, I didn't realize there was fucking Dillard's there.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, where did that pop up all of a sudden, right?
Weird. And that's pretty much what it's going to be like. Where you have a little here, a little there. I mean, at this point, again, the next thing there'll be some visual evidence. Right now, it's all script. It's all people who are elbows kind of deep into this thing to understand it or to be open and receptive to it. So it's still a really easy, manageable portion of the population to kind of keep within those understandings. Most people would think that the stuff we are talking about is kind of crazy. And we've made incredible progress in just the 5 years we've been on the air.
It's amazing, right? At the beginning of the 5 years, we were crazy. But now we're talking about, we found craft.
My point, right?
Right.
So our small niche of people who kind of are like-minded and say, it would be silly of us to think there's not anybody else. And then the next level is, are they capable of traveling the distance in which they've got to travel? And I'm not smart enough to say they can or can't. And yes, until I have an alien in front of me, it will be hard to really defend my position. With the track record in which I've seen from my own personal studies in my life, you cannot trust the government. So if the government says they do not exist,
take out the
can't throw the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, let's think about this in another capacity. Let's look at the flip side of the coin of this. So you have this guy who's supposedly a high-ranking intelligence, officer, right, of the U.S. military.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly comes out and says all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is this maybe a kind of like guided thing that maybe they're trying to show you something here to kind of not show you something else that's going on? And the other thing, usually what I'm alluding to here, Jay, I'm not trying to be around the bush. Are they coming out with shit like this to hide something else that they're doing on the other side?
Did you hear that Trump was indicted today?
Oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah.
Yes, of course that's what they're doing. Yeah. Let's see. What kind of major things should we be thinking about? I don't know. The environment, how our entire economy is built to collapse it. Should we be talking about overpopulation, lack of resources as it is that we're burning
and
through
infrastructure
really quickly? Should we talk about the weather? Should we talk about global warming? Should we talk about any of those things? Should we talk about the fact that there is someone out there swinging his big nuclear dick for lack of subtleties? No.
Yeah,
bro. We got alien spacecraft. Isn't that cool, guys?
That's
Yeah.
great. Check that out, right?
Check that out. Listen,
Well,
this crazy old man
mhm,
is going to tell you some stuff, and there's going to be some letters and things that look questionable. But is there? I don't
right,
know. That's for you guys to debate. You guys talk
yeah,
amongst yourself. I'll be over here taking your money.
right. Just like how right before 9/11 happened, Donald Rumsfeld said there was $3 trillion that were missing from the I think it was the Treasury. They don't know where it happened. And next thing you know,
Not
9/11 happens.
anymore.
Not anymore.
That works.
It's amazing, right? People don't
That
remember
works.
that, but that happened. That's crazy.
I remember it.
Well, Jay, yeah. Again, I apologize for the UFO centric stuff, but I mean, it just keeps happening. I'm sorry, guys. Which brings me to the next, not episode, but story. Police body cam films UFO response to scared locals seeing aliens in yard. Jay. So now we're starting to get to the visual stuff here. All right, let's get into this one.
Let's
America's
see.
Southwest is, of course, a hotspot of paranormal activity, as we all know, Jay. There's, of course, the area, Secret Area 51, which is, center of Roswell and all that stuff in New Mexico. But what happened a couple weeks ago might list the top of, really strange things that happened in that area. On April 30th, just before midnight, a Las Vegas Metro Police officer's body camera captured something streaking across the night sky, seemingly falling to Earth. He wasn't the only one either, though. People in California, Nevada, and Utah all saw a flash, according to the American Meteor Society. Normally, this wouldn't be too big of a deal, Jay, but likely just a piece of, space junk or meteorite that, soon after just broke off and, came to Earth and fell apart, whatever. But, the Las Vegas PD got a little 911 call from residents reporting something crashed into their backyard and that two very large creatures were standing out there by it. So, 8 News Now got the recordings from that call, and they're chilling, to say the least. And they're on our podcast website, of course, darkprintradio.com. And in it, you hear the caller tell dispatcher something crashed, and now there's like an 8-foot person standing beside it, and another one is inside and has big eyes and is looking at us. And they're still here. Then they added, I swear to God, this is not a joke. This is actually something that's going on, and we're terrified. And asked for more of a description. The caller said that they're large. They're about 8 foot, 9 feet, 10 feet, maybe. They look like aliens to us, big eyes. They have big eyes, and like I can't explain it, and a big mouth, like shiny eyes, and they're not human. They're definitely 100% not human. That's what he says. And even police were anxious to respond to the body cam footage. Picks up one officer saying, I'm so nervous right now. I have butterflies, bro. I saw a shooting star, and now there's these people saying that there's aliens in their backyard. That's what these cops are saying. So, yeah, Jay, uh, you know, the bug-eyed people crash landing in people's backyard
With
and
shiny mouth.
say, hey, yeah, with shiny mouths and
You got a pretty mouth.
yeah, pretty bad boy. Yeah, it goes into what's going on lately, Jay. I mean, it seems to be ramping up. It seems to be a huge ramp up right now. Last couple years, but this year more especially.
Well, again, you're taking everything into account that's going on. The world has never been more divided. We've never been more stuck in our own echo chambers. We have never been more skeptical of the other side, and we have never, ever been so untrusting of what surrounds us that I think the population as a whole is a little bit more open and willing to it. So the more open we are to it, the more we're going to hear these things. The more we hear these things, the more they're going to grow. And again, I'm not saying that they aren't. There's some video and whatnot footage. Yeah, I think just like anything else, it's a numbers game. And as our numbers increase, these things will eventually happen if they haven't already started happening now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jay, that's a good wrap up for Dark Fringe News. Again, I apologize for the very UFO alien eccentric Dark Fringe News as of late, but just can't seem to escape it at this point, Jay. But it is what it is. Which brings us to our next topic. Yes, they're out there. Our next topic here for tonight, Jay. What the F, Florida man? And for those that don't know this segment or are unfamiliar with the segment, Jay scours the internet and looks for one of the craziest stories that comes out of our state of Florida. So, what do you have for tonight, Jay? For what the F, Florida man?
I did not. I did. I spent weeks looking for this. I did not find it at 8:55 right before we came on. Florida man charged for throwing hot dog at St. Pete police officer.
Wow. He threw a wiener at an officer.
He's just trying to throw around some meat.
Yeah, there you go. Slanging some meat, huh?
He said, hey, pig, nice to meet ya.
Hey, here's a wiener.
What's up?
So St. Petersburg. Here's my wiener. St. Petersburg, Florida, which is around the Tampa area for those that are not familiar. Jay, get into the story here.
Newport Richie man was arrested on a felony charge Saturday after authorities say he threw a hot dog at an officer who was warning him of violating a city ordinance and arresting him without documents.
Oh, wow.
Officer said Jason Stoll, 47, of Newport Richie, ignored the warnings and continued to sell hot dogs on the roadway Saturday around 12 a.m. All right, so pimp this. Homie's standing there in the median at midnight going, "You want my hot dog?"
Yeah, that doesn't seem...
I'll sell you my hot dog.
Yeah, it seems like he was selling something else, but go ahead. Wink, wink.
Ain't no meat between these bones, lady.
There you go.
So, Stoll then became extremely upset before he intentionally threw the hot dog at the officer, documents say. The officer was in full police uniform at the time of the incident. Stoll is charged with battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting an officer without violence.
Oh, how did he resist without violence?
If convicted, chucking that little piece of penis look like meat at that cop is going to cost him 3 years.
No way. Are you kidding me? There's child molesters out there that get less time than that.
I know.
That is so
because
fucked
our
up.
Values in this country are all
free, Mr. Stoll. Free that guy. That's what we need to start. Is this guy still in jail?
Listen.
He threw a wiener at a cop.
Throw a different kind of wiener. You shouldn't be throwing any kind of wiener.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
Okay?
I get it. Yeah.
They both should just be locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And locked away where their wieners can be kept to themselves.
Yeah, well, that's what happens, man. You catch the heat when you're slinging that meat. I don't know what else to say there, Jay, but he caught it.
We can go ahead and leave him squeaking from the freaking, buddy. Okay. Leave him oinking from the boinking.
Yeah, there's Jay comes out with the other
feeling from the feeling.
From the ceiling. Oh, Lord. Oh, man. Wow, what a story. Oh, I mean, he could face up to 3 years. So that's the crazy part. You know what I mean?
Just for throwing a hot dog at a cop.
I know. Yeah. What was the hot dog going to do? You know?
Who hasn't smoked a little of the Mary J? Okay. And thought, you know what would really hit the spot? Hot dogs. You go get like 20 hot dogs and you realize it's a lot of hot dogs. You should share with your friends on the median. And then some authoritarian comes over and tries to make you tell you that you can't be selling your extra hot dogs. Right. Well, fuck you. This is America, guy.
Yeah, I'm going to smack you in the face with my wiener.
Ask me about my wiener.
Oh, what a great story, Jay, for What the Florida man. Oh, man. Again, I'm not surprised. For those that don't live in Florida, don't be just when you hear these stories, don't be like, oh, my God, that's just crazy. No, this is Florida. Tuesday. That's Florida. Exactly. That's Florida. That happens any day of the week here. But anyways, thank you, Jay, for What the F Florida man. Really appreciate that. That's a great story. Which is going to bring us to our interview here with Andy Jiang from Hidden Stories. We hope you enjoy this interview with Andy Jiang, and we'll be back here in a second with our guest. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on another edition of Dark Fringe Radio, your number one source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime. Thank you so much for joining us, of course, on another adventure. And tonight we have a very special guest. His name is Andy Jiang. He is the host of a podcast that just came out in April called Hidden Stories. And its show is really, it really shows different stories of everyday people, basically what it is. And it really uncovers fascinating, unexpected personalities, perspectives on life, love, and everything in between. As one of the internet's most popular storytellers, Andy has amassed a robust following across his platforms for more than 3.6 million followers on TikTok and another 1.3 million on YouTube alone. So, yeah, you're really killing it out there, my friend. And he shares his stories about everyone, from the first doctor to perform a C-section to people who've actually been struck by lightning and had lived to tell the tale, of course. He has a unique talent for making even the most mundane stories come to life with vivid detail and emotion, and his authenticity and relatable nature has made him a trusted voice in the overcrowded social media landscape. Please welcome our guest tonight, Mr. Andy Jiang. Andy, thanks for coming on Dark Fringe Radio, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, my friend. Yeah, man. Listen, your publicist, reached out to me, and I started checking out your show. I love what you're doing there. You started it in April. Tell us a little bit about the show. What got you inspired to do it, and so on.
Yeah. So I guess the very start of the show, the seed, if you will, came really from way back when I was in elementary school, middle school, and I just started in my free time. I was online. I was like doing random stuff, and I was coming across these random stories and facts that would be on either YouTube videos or these online websites, forums like Reddit. And I used to, like, back in the day, go down these rabbit holes for like hours upon hours upon hours. And I guess over quarantine, when basically, for a bit more context, I had a bet made by my friend who was one of my close friends in high school, still one of my close friends. And he told me, he said, TikTok's popping off right now. There's a lot of people getting on there, creating, blowing up. And I'll bet you $20 if you can just go on TikTok, start posting videos, and you get 1,000 followers in a week. And the reason he targeted me was because back then I had no social media platforms. I had an Instagram, but it was like no profile picture. There wasn't really anything on it, no posts. So I was like sort of chronically offline, and he was like, "Oh, just post, and if you hit 1,000 followers, I'll give you $20." And I was thinking, okay, normally if it was other circumstances or in school, for example, I would probably have said no. But since it was over quarantine, I was just so bored. I had nothing else to do. So I just, I did it. And it's crazy to think about, but that was the entire start of my channel.
Wow.
And when I was sort of experimenting with niches, just while trying to get these 1,000 followers, and after that, which I did hit that 1,000 followers in that 7 days just by like posting a bunch of random stuff. But when I was trying to really like hunker down and create niches to really, like, I guess, get more followers, more views, I eventually stumbled across stories, because that's something I'd always been really interested in the past. So when I came to that idea, I was like, wait, I have these stories I've heard of in the past, these really, really interesting, almost like unreal stories that you would never expect would be real life. Why would I not share them? I feel like it's such like an interesting thing that a lot of people would be interested in. So I started with that, and I got really lucky. My first story ever that I told blew up. It got massive views. And that's what kind of got me started for the story side of social media. So I started posting more, telling stories, improving the storytelling, getting into longer form, getting into podcasting. And today, the main focus, if we're going to go from then all the way to now, is to just, as you mentioned at the beginning, share stories that sort of maybe aren't as mainstream, aren't as known, and just be able to tell stories in a way that really like demonstrates all the unique and really, really diverse experiences and things that people all across the world go through. So just humans in general, like all these crazy experiences that you would never anticipate and imagine. So it's really cool to be able to do that, because while doing the research for a lot of the videos that I do make, it just blows my mind, like, on this earth, how many different diverse experiences, diverse people, diverse areas. It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great niche, and it's a great thing to actually get into, because people love just stories of other people, and people are always fascinated by, of course, stories of, things that, like you said, are close to like, is that true? Or is that, you start to question, wow, that's so like unthinkable. But yeah, these stories are true. And, Andy, of course, you tell these stories, and, Is there anyone that you've been like completely blown back by, like anyone in particular that, after you've done like this, I've done over, me and my partner here on our podcast, we've done a lot of episodes, and some of these episodes that we do, we just sit back and we're just like, man, that's crazy that we just, covered that. That doesn't even seem right. But has there been one story so far that kind of sticks out to you?
If you're saying one story, man, that's hard. I feel like all of them are just
Hmm.
really, really, really interesting. And honestly, I could choose the very last story I covered, and that could be one that could be considered the story because I feel like every story that I end up doing for long form video, especially, could be considered just so like earth-shattering because none of them I've ever like expected could happen. But
Mm.
the last video I covered, or the video that I'm covering now, which will be live in a week, is about this man. His name is Frederic Bourdain. He's a French dude. And when I first came across the story, the one thing that was told to me about this guy on the forum I found, like the headline that was like sort of like hook, was
Mhm.
man man impersonates missing child. So that immediately caught my attention. I was like, huh,
Yeah.
why would someone go out of their way to impersonate being a missing child? So that was really interesting. And then I dove down the rabbit hole and wow, this dude, Frederic, he in his career, he said this is I think something he said, but he's impersonated more than 500 different people. And
Mm.
he does so because for I guess for the context, he had a very rough childhood, a lot of trauma, and basically he never had a childhood where he was like having fun with friends, not a worry in the world. And when he grew older, when he was like teenage years, maybe like 20, 21, 22, he was thinking, okay, like I need to find a way to like live my childhood. I feel like this has been taken away from me. I need to
Mm.
get this back. So he started impersonating children, actually missing children, after
Wow.
a few run-ins with the law where he like created fake identities for himself, as in like fake children identities. But at one
Mhm.
point, he realized that wasn't effective enough. So he actually started impersonating missing children in real life. And it went to the
Mm.
extent that he managed to successfully impersonate someone who had been missing for around 3 years in the US. And the family of that missing child invited him in and totally believed that he was their son because he came in and he was like, oh, I'm your missing kid. And I mean, common sense dictates that every parent, every like sister, every brother would be like, oh, I know my kid, like this is not my kid. But
Mhm.
that missing child, who was around 13, had been gone for 3 years. And since Frederic was very, very similar, he was just like, he resembled the child just enough to be able to pull off and say, oh, in those 3 years, I've changed a lot. I've gone through a lot of different physical changes. He was
Mhm.
able to actually successfully live with his family under the assumption that he was their kid for 5 months, which is just ridiculous. And then
Wow.
a private investigator came and they were like, wait, like the details aren't adding up, and he got caught and he
Mhm.
was sent to prison. But he's done that a couple times. I think at least missing children 4 times. The
Mhm.
identities of just people he fabricated in his mind, 500, well over 500 from his own account.
Wow.
So very, very
That's
interesting.
Yeah, that's absolutely remarkable. I mean, somebody who's able to do that, I mean, kind of makes you maybe think that maybe he had some type of, DID, dissociative,
Oh yeah,
identity disorder,
that was one of my first thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. As soon as you said that, I was like, man, because I mean, I think I'm pretty smart, but I don't think I could pull off 500.
No, no.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's a lot, and you have to
Yeah.
have like maybe some type of psychosis to be able to do something like that.
Oh
But
yeah.
man,
Oh yeah.
yeah, what a fascinating story. Andy, I mean, these stories are so unbelievable, but I know that you do also cover some of the paranormal as well. Is that correct?
A little bit, yeah. Paranormal, I would say less so, more so like mysteries and
Hmm.
not exactly true crime, but just bizarre stories of that sort.
Hmm. Okay. Can you give us an example of something like that you've covered?
Paranormal or the
Yeah.
bizarre?
The bizarre, yeah.
The bizarre, yeah. So bizarre, I guess what is your definition of bizarre? Because I'm going off of a definition of just like again, like very, very unreal stories that you wouldn't believe normally.
That would work for me. Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
yeah, great. Yeah. So a bizarre story, I can say another one that I covered recently, the case of Bobby Dunbar. Have you heard of that one?
No, I have not.
No, yeah, Bobby Dunbar. He was this kid from Louisiana, And he basically, when he was on a trip with his family, a fishing trip to this lake, I think it was called Swayze Lake. He went missing on this trip, and it was just really crazy. It was just 1 second he was there, another second he wasn't there. It's like this 5-year-old kid, and there was this massive, massive, massive search that was launched. Everyone, all the cops came, all the hunting dogs, everyone came to try to find this kid, and they couldn't find him, and which was really crazy because he literally was there, and then he just wasn't. It was like a
Right.
split-second thing. He was just gone.
Mhm.
So a couple months go by, like 9 months go by, and no sign of this guy, no evidence. And the cops are like, "Oh, he's gone. Like he must have like either fallen into the lake and drowned, or an alligator must have gone to him."
Mhm.
But what's crazy is that around 10 months after the disappearance, Bobby Dunbar or someone in a part of the US outside of Louisiana, called in and called a tip to the police and said, "Oh, we found a kid that looks very similar to Bobby Dunbar." And the people who, his parents obviously were shocked. They had
Hmm.
assumed he was dead, their son was dead, but they came and they looked at the boy. They were like, "Oh, is this my kid?" They wanted to come and check. And although at the very beginning, when they first saw the kid, their first reaction and instinct was, "This is not my son. He looks nothing like my son." I guess through either like their extreme grief or trauma, at a certain point, they actually convinced themselves that this boy was their son, because it was everyone else was saying, "I mean, he looks like your boy. He has like the same identifying features. Like he had a
Mhm.
mole in the right spot. He had like different like physical features that aligned." And they actually just took this boy again, also similar to the last story actually, but they took this boy and said, "Okay, this is my son now." And he lived with them for his entire life, even though there was a woman out there named Julia who, well, was very adamant that they had just stolen her son from her and that it was her son. But since Julia was lower class citizen who wasn't very affluent, she couldn't afford lawyers, so she
Mhm.
actually just had her son stolen from her. And
Mhm.
about a century later, when DNA evidence could be used to check to see who this person was, whether it was Bobby Dunbar, they realized that no, Julia was actually right. The other family, Bobby Dunbar's family, had stolen her son and
Mhm.
raised him as Bobby Dunbar for his entire life without knowing it. And
Wow.
yeah, it's
What a
ridiculous.
crazy story. I mean, just the twists and turns in that alone are just mind-boggling. I mean, how could you even, wrap your head around that? That's so crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
and to be that kid and then to go back into that family and then the family, I mean, how do you even process all that stuff? I don't even know. I mean,
Uh,
do you find a common thread, Andy, in all these stories? I mean, that you've covered so far? Is there a commonality to these stories that you find at all?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I realized this through, I guess, just researching some of the more stories that are uh people who end up in prison, for example, on the darker end. But what
Mhm.
happens is a lot of the time you have someone who goes and, for example, like starts stealing a bunch of art, or starts impersonating missing children, or ends up in jail at one point or another in their life. When I have a story like that, almost always at the very beginning of their life, you can
Mhm.
trace what happens later in their life, their misgivings, their like faults, and the things that they do that are wrong, to incidents at the beginning of their childhood that were either traumatic, or things that they were not allowed to have in their childhood, or poor parenting. And almost every
Mhm.
time I have a story like this, it's very, very similar, almost to the extent that I feel like every story of mine starts the same way, where it's like I'm talking about like this child having this really traumatic childhood. And then that's what ends up culminating in people going out and committing like horrible acts.
Mhm.
So it is really interesting because, again, that raises the conversation of whether people actually are at fault for doing all these horrible things, because they're raised in these communities and
Conditions.
environments that
Yeah.
basically encourages them to do these things, and actually just creates it forces their brain to develop in a certain way that just, I don't know, it's always been really interesting to me to see that all these like experiences are very, very similar, and then go on to lead to very similar experiences afterwards.
Right. Yeah. It seems like, yeah, it's the environment, of course, that kind of bruised the whole thing, really, in an aspect. When you look back at it, that's what the number one key ingredient to the whole thing, what it
Oh
seems
yeah.
like. Yeah. It's amazing. Andy, as your background as a storyteller, your approach to podcasting, I love because you just, bang, tell a story just like that. You know what I mean? What inspired you? What story, when I know as you were a researcher first and then you got into it, what were maybe some of the first stories that you encountered that really sparked your interest in getting into this field?
That's a good question. Stories, there's a lot.
There's so many, I know.
The very first story I told on my channel could be a great example of this. This was all the way back in 2020 over quarantine, and this story was about this guy, and this is actually the first story I was talking about earlier that just blew up and caused me to, just take this niche and say, okay, this is very viable. There's definitely people who are interested in stories. I can continue
Mhm.
telling stories and maybe even turn this into something I can just do for a living.
Mhm.
But yeah, the story was about this man. It was this old man who was suffering from terminal cancer, stage 4 cancer. He goes into the doctor. The doctor tells him, you have something like a couple weeks to live, maybe like a month to live.
Mhm.
And this old man, who's like in his 70s, he's already very debilitated. He's gone through months of chemo at this point, and he's now been informed that he's going to die and that there's nothing anyone can do about it.
Mhm.
He went back home and he was thinking, and he realized that he wanted to do something for his community in order to sort of leave a legacy behind before he died. So he wanted to go out and do something for the community. And when he thought about what mattered the most to him, since he was a very religious man, he decided he was going to go out and just paint a local church until
Mhm.
he just couldn't anymore. And then that would be the final thing he would leave behind after his death. So he went, and even though he was again just really, really struggling physically and mentally from all the pain he was going through and all the chemotherapy wearing down on his body, he just goes
Mhm.
out and just sits out there in the like boiling sun and just starts painting the church by hand by himself. And he
Wow.
does this for day on day on day for around a couple weeks. And to his surprise, as he kept doing this, it actually he realized that he wasn't feeling more fatigued. He wasn't feeling worse as time went on. He realized that he was actually feeling healthier. He was feeling stronger, which was really interesting because doctors had told him that he was going to die soon.
Mhm.
So after a month had gone by and this old man was still out there kicking and he was feeling greater, that he was feeling better than he had in a year almost, he goes back to his doctor to see like what the heck is going on. And his doctor does a quick scan on his tumor and it realizes miraculously the tumor is just gone. It's just like it's shrunken enough so that the cancer has gone into remission. And the science behind it, because yeah, there's obviously science behind it, is that he had chemotherapy in the past. And I guess sometimes the chemo takes a lot longer to actually kick in. But even
Mhm.
though he wasn't on chemo during the past month where he had been painting the church, the chemo kicked in late and actually basically just killed all the cancer cells in that area. So he had a sort of like late recovery, a late effect, and
Mhm.
he just recovered entirely from the cancer, even though he'd been told that he had a month to live. And that story made the news, and back in like at least a decade ago, I'm assuming, because I heard about that way back when. So when
Right.
I was thinking about stories to cover for my first story ever, when I was doing storytelling as a niche, thinking about that, that was one of the main stories that came to my head immediately. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I have to go tell this one because this one is just one that has always stuck in my mind. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think that's a good example.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, yeah, that story alone, that's just wild. I mean, we've covered a lot of stories like that in our podcast. I mean, let me give you an example. There was this
Yeah,
one
I'd love to hear. Yeah.
yeah, there was one called The Man from Torrid. And
Oh,
have you heard about this at all?
I think I have. I think I
Okay.
have.
So there's this guy that is traveling in, I believe, the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so he has a passport and he gets stopped, of course, through customs, and then they check his passport. And some kind of ruckus happens, and then he ends up just disappearing, like flat out disappearing from customs. Like he was in customs and he's just gone. And then when they look at his passport, it's like a passport from a place that nobody even doesn't even exist. It's called Torrid.
Mm,
And so people think that he may be a time traveler that came, was able to come back and forth. And
yeah.
because they can't find this place, but there's a passport, and this guy just automatically just disappears out of nowhere. So
Yeah.
such is the legend of the from Torrid. But yeah, stuff like that. I love stuff,
Yeah.
stories like that. I mean, whether it's true or not, you're just like, oh man, just it gets you thinking, you know what I mean? It really does get
Yeah,
you
yeah,
thinking about, what are the possibilities, out there, you know what I mean? We just
exactly.
covered another guy in our last podcast, excuse me, Joe Greenstein, and
Hmm.
he's known as the Mighty Atom, and he was like around in the I'd say 50s and 60s. He got popular, but he was a man who did feats of strength that was able to do things that you would never imagine. I mean, he was able to take a horseshoe and bend it in every way that you wanted. He's like, okay,
Hmm.
what kind of like, which way do you want me to bend it? You want
Oh
to make
my
a question
God.
mark? Yeah, like stuff like. And this guy was 130 pounds,
Oh
five
my
foot five.
God.
So I
Oh
mean,
my God.
no big guy. You know what I mean? Not at all. But supposedly he was able to use the power of his mind to manipulate
Uh,
things. And he says, yeah, I just become one with the object, and I'm able to manipulate it, and I'm able to do things. He
wow.
supposedly was able to hold a airplane as it's trying to take off with his hair. So they tied it.
Oh,
They tied a rope to his hair, and they tied the rope to the airplane, and he actually stopped it from taking off. For most
dude.
people, yeah, for most people, their scalp would have been ripped off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But with this guy, he just had this some kind of thing, man. And
Yes,
just
yeah. I mean, you had to.
yeah, yeah, and it's just again, we run into these stories that you listen to, you're like, man, that just is not possible. But these
Yeah.
people do exist. There's people out there that have actually,
Exactly. Yeah.
experienced these things and done these things. But Andy, you being a storyteller, I'm being a storyteller. I love listening to other stories and getting ideas, right?
Yes.
So where do I get a lot of my stories from? Is from family. Do you
Mm.
get a lot of some of your stories from family? I mean, do you source any of those yet? Have you gone to that well yet to maybe ask them, hey, tell
Wow.
me some stuff,
Family.
yeah.
Actually, now that you mention it, I get it's probably different from you, but I get stories from, for example, my family's from China.
Mm-hmm.
So they know all like the old like Chinese history,
Mm-hmm.
Chinese very, very, very interesting stories from all the way back when. But these
Mm-hmm.
stories that they know, they're often not going to be covered on English American websites. So
Right.
if you were to go on Reddit, for example, I wouldn't find them most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my family has actually told me a couple that I've been able to incorporate into videos, just
Oh,
really
okay.
fascinating stuff. But for other stories, as in just most of the stories I cover on a daily basis, no, I don't think family. That's really interesting though. Just like
Yeah.
you ask them, or it just comes up in convo.
Just come in conversation, you know what I mean? You just start
Wow,
asking questions about, hey,
wow,
tell me about when you were growing up. Anything interesting happened to you when you grew up? Do
yeah,
you remember anything of significance? You know what I mean? And then
wow,
all of a
yeah,
sudden they'll just like, oh no, that's you. The first response is, oh no, I had a normal child, everything, and then they start thinking about it, and then you see the wheels turning in their head, and then it's so
yeah,
funny because then all of a sudden it's like a light bulb that went off, and then oh, I remember this one time, and I remember, for instance, this one story my grandmother told me.
yeah,
I'm from Puerto Rico. My descendants are from Puerto Rico,
yeah,
and so my grandparents pretty much lived on the island until they were in their 30s, and they decided to
mm,
migrate over here to America.
yeah,
And but while on the island, my grandma told me that there was this area where she lived that's
mm,
next to the sea that has this almost like lagoon. And in this lagoon, there is a pirate's box, like a treasure box, held
oh,
down by chains. But nobody could ever get to it because every time you go into the lagoon, it rises. And then if you're caught in there, you're going to end up drowning, basically.
yeah,
So there's
wow,
been legends of many people going over there trying to get into it. And then you
yeah,
just see their bodies there because they tried and they end up drowning. So, like,
wow.
stories like that.
What is that called? Is there a name for that? Like
I
the
don't even know what that's. Yeah, if there is a name for something like that, but you hear these stories and you're just like, all right, Grandma, that's great. I appreciate that.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, yeah, yeah. But I'm telling you, man, that's a good pool source of information. Try
Oh
to dig
yeah.
into that, man. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
I think you're
Um,
right. Yeah.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Andy, where do you think from this point, like how far are you going to take this thing, man, as far as the podcast is concerned? Because I really think you have something going on here. Where do you see this evolving to eventually?
Yeah, I appreciate it. First of all, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. The second point, where I see this going, I think, right now, just short-term vision. I just want to keep like building on the I guess, pillars of storytelling. I kind of refer them to, so I can just improve like the way I like structure stories, the way I pace stories, especially for podcasting, which I realized is actually different from video because the pacing is slightly different, and there are certain things that you could do to like improve like the retention immediately, because in video, for example, like there's like a bunch of stuff on the screen and that's usually the way you do it, but you actually, for podcasts, at least for mine, which is non-video, you actually need to use your voice to immediately captivate people with the story. So I've been trying to figure out how to do that better. But
Mhm.
the end goal for me is just to be able to tell stories, and I mean, ideally have people listen to them.
Mhm.
And beyond that, I just want to be able to eventually scale to a place where I can have stories in different languages, have different channels where I cover stories from different types of niches. For example, like right now I'm doing like mystery, bizarre, unreal stories on my current podcast. Maybe sometime else I'll do some like true crime, and other than that, I'll do some like stories about how like different podcasters or YouTubers made their first video to last video, their journey.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of ideas for just stories, and I think stories are something that we're just always going to be around. People are always going to enjoy listening to stories, and it's just a matter of getting better at telling them and getting better at like the whole process of creating, editing, all that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a process. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I've been doing it for 5 years now, almost six.
Wow.
And yeah, you learn. It's a learning curve. There's a lot of things that you learn on the go that people don't, teach you, and you learn, you're like, oh
Yeah.
shit, that's what I had to do. Okay, all right. This is what I have to do to do this right and do this right and make sure this is, cut the right way. And
Yeah.
it's a million different things. People don't realize. I mean, the people just think that,
They
we
don't.
just come on here
Yeah.
and just tell a story and then that's it. You research the
Yeah.
story, you're citing the story, you're figuring out how to, structure it a certain way and how to make sure, obviously to think if it's going to be a viable story too, on top of that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So
That's a big one. Yeah.
yeah, that's and so people, don't understand that it takes a lot of work into the process of what you and I do when it comes to, podcasting and stuff like that. But I love seeing new guys like yourself coming on, new platforms like TikTok. And, that's actually one thing that we're kind of old school, because, I'm in a different age bracket as you. I guess they
Yeah.
call it Gen X, but we haven't even caught up to TikTok yet. I mean, we're still on our
Wow.
websites yet, but, see, having somebody like you on the podcast, Andy, I can learn from you and say, okay, you know what? Yeah, it's probably time to do something about that, and start,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
being different, and getting our stuff out there in different avenues. But
Oh
that's what
yeah.
I love seeing about guys like yourselves telling, getting on these podcasts and doing your own thing. I think it's great. I think what you're doing on Hidden Stories is wonderful, and I implore everybody to go check it out. Andy, where can people find your podcast?
Yeah, you can find it on basically every podcasting platform out there. Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, to name a few. And yeah, it's just titled Hidden Stories.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Andy. Listen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Listen, if you ever you need any kind of help or anything at all, any source material, just reach out. I'll be more than happy to help, man. And thank you for coming on the podcast. Much success to you, and I hope things just grow for you in the future, my friend.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, likewise, everything same for me. And yeah, keep on killing it. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and if you ever have a show about near-death experiences, I'm your
Ah,
man. I've had two, so
wow. That is one of the ideas. That is one of the ideas. Yeah.
let me know. I'll definitely know. So, all right, my friend Andy, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and we'll have to have you come back on in the future. Okay, my friend.
Of course, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you so much.
Thanks so much, Andy. Thank you. Well, everybody, thank you for sticking with us through that interview. And we hope you enjoyed that interview with Mr. Andy Jiang. We appreciate him coming on the podcast. And of course, you can follow him on Instagram and, of course, TikTok at Andy Y. Jiang, and follow all this stuff. I mean, this guy's got a lot of really interesting stories that are coming out as of late. Like I said, short form, very quick paced, really to the point, but really cool. So check out his stuff, and we really appreciate it. So that brings us to a close here for tonight, Jay. Anything else before we say goodnight?
Everyone, keep your eye on the sky, your feet on the ground, and your nose to the grindstone, and out of other people's business.
Yeah, there you go. I like that one, Jay. Keep your mind and your nose out of people's business, and mind yourself before you mind other people. That's a good
Your
one. I like
mind on
that.
your money and your money on your mind.
There you go. So thank you, Jay, for that. And we appreciate it. Of course, you can follow all our stuff at darkfringeradio.com. Make sure you go there and check out all of our latest and greatest. And we'll see you guys again next week on another edition of Dark Fringe Radio.
Dark Fringe Radio, your premier source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory and true crime.